And there are some things that never die. The human brain is a complicated bitch. Once an image is burned in, it's scarred there forever.
We got an assignment.
Welcome back to the channel, folks. You know, it amazes me that Resident Evil 5 is still the best-selling RE game of all time, sitting somewhere shy of 19 million copies. It was even Capcom's best-selling game period, before Monster Hunter World took that crown. Despite those numbers though, you'll have a hard time finding an RE fan who claims it's their favorite, or even has it in their top 5 in the series. Is that a reflection of the game's quality? Or because it strayed even farther from what made Resident Evil, Resident Evil? More so than RE4 already did. Spoilers, it's the second one. Still, that doesn't mean RE5 isn't great in its own right. Honestly, I consider it an amazing game that still holds up over 17 years later. I enjoyed replaying it after all this time, but some of its faults were a lot more noticeable now. Plus, it repeats a lot of the same beats as RE4, without really improving on them, and in some cases actually feeling worse, though in some aspects, a little better too. So let's get into it. Don't forget to punch that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe if you're new. We're slowly winding down that road to hitting 100k subs. So who knows, maybe I'll get that silver plaque before this decade is over.
Okay, I have only one very important question. You got a smoke?
Got gum.
Depending on how long you've been following my channel, it may surprise a few of you to learn that this isn't the first time I've covered Resident Evil. I actually reviewed RE4 like 4 years ago, back when I had like a few hundred subs. You can check out the video if you want. It's far from my best work, but you can sort of see the foundation that would become my review style. I bring it up because when Resident Evil 4 released, it completely rewired what people expected from the series. Over-the-shoulder camera, way more action, a much bigger focus on combat over puzzle solving and resource scarcity. It's widely considered one of the best games ever made. It's my favorite in the series, and pretty much every major studio took notes from it for the next decade. Resident Evil 4 was a generation-defining title. So when it came time for Capcom to make RE5, they were in a weird spot. RE4 was a hard act to follow, and instead of taking a risk and going back to the series' horror roots, they essentially asked, what if we did that again, but bigger? From the jump, the design pillar wasn't horror, it was co-op. Capcom built the entire campaign around 2 players from day one, which meant action had to take priority, since survival horror tension doesn't really work when you've got a buddy backing you up. While this wasn't the first time the series dabbled in co-op, Outbreak did it first back in 2003, this was the first time a mainline series game did, so the pressure was on not to screw this up. That's also where Sheva and the African setting came in. The choice to set the game in Kajuju sparked controversy at the time, with critics calling out the imagery of a white protagonist gunning down black enemies as racially insensitive. And look, I remember that controversy, but it always felt like a pretty superficial criticism to me. You're on the continent of Africa. Friendly reminder, Africa is not a country, and the people who live there are primarily black. If this game was set in China, you'd be shooting Asian enemies. That's not racism, that's geography. More importantly, the game actually treats the native population as victims, not villains. The people of Kajuju are exploited for their natural resources, experimented on, enslaved. RE5 is, whether intentionally or not, dipping into the devastating effects of colonization. It does it clumsily, and it's nowhere near the main theme of the game, but it's far from some racist power fantasy. That said, there are some genuinely questionable writing decisions in here, but I'll get to that later. The story itself picks up the Wesker thread from RE4. That's been dangling since Code Veronica. so there's also pressure to actually pay off years of build-up with the final confrontation. So that's the position RE5 is in walking into this, chasing the biggest hit in the series' history, built around a co-op first design that pushes it even further from horror, all while trying to close out its most important villain arc. Alright, enough context, let's get into it.
I should have seen it coming. It didn't take long after the fall of the Umbrella Corporation for their bioweapons to end up in the hands of terrorists. A new era of bioterrorism descended upon vulnerable countries, shifting the balance of power throughout the region.
Quick intro for anyone who needs it. This is Chris, I Need to Preserve the Bloodline Redfield, one of the original protagonists from the first Resident Evil back in '96. He was part of Raccoon City's Elite Stars Alpha team, and got dragged into the whole Spencer Mansion nightmare that basically kicked off the series. After that, he spent some time tracking down Umbrella, eventually linking up with his sister Claire during the Code Veronica incident on Rockbird Island. Setting aside the remake of the original game, it's been almost a decade since Chris was the lead of an RE game, and he's looking a little different. My boy's been hitting the gym and eating his protein. He went from, "I'll have her home before curfew, sir," to, "Your daughter calls me daddy too." He narrates the setup. Not long after Umbrella fell, their bioweapons started landing in the hands of terrorists across the globe. With everyone afraid of another Raccoon City, the world's governments backed the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium in forming the BSAA, an anti-terrorism unit that infiltrates and neutralizes bioweapon hotspots. Officially, that's why Chris is in Africa, to support the BSAA. Unofficially, he's got personal reasons for taking this mission, but we'll get to that later. Next, let's meet Chris's new partner, Sheva Alomar, introduced to us with a lingering ass shot. Nice.
Welcome to Africa. My name is Sheva Alomar.
Chris Redfield.
Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Redfield. It's an honor.
Just Chris, thanks. So you'll be accompanying me to the destination?
Yes. Tensions are running high ever since the change in government.
I'll bet. Intel says it's a haven for terrorists now.
And I'm not going to be happy to see an American, BSAA or not. That's why I'm your partner. Help put them at ease.
Well, I'm sure you'll do just fine. Partner.
Quick bit of backstory on Sheva here. She grew up in West Africa, in a company town run by Umbrella that actually had decent living conditions compared to the surrounding area, which is how her family ended up there. Then Umbrella ran a bioweapon experiment that triggered an outbreak, and rather than deal with it properly, they had the town's entire population massacred to cover it up, her parents included. Sheva survived purely by hiding while it happened. She was eventually found by an uncle who'd actually gone there to loot the place, assuming everyone was dead. Things didn't quite get better afterwards, as living with her uncle was a bit rough. He had 7 other kids already, and things were made worse by Umbrella refusing to compensate any of the victims' families, so money was tight. Eventually, Sheva ran off trying to find her way back home, collapsed in the savannah, and was picked up by guerrilla fighters. She'd learned the truth about what happened to her family, that the cover-up went all the way to the government, and so she joined the guerrillas' cause. Years later, she returned on those same guerrillas when they decided to cut a deal with Umbrella themselves, which earned Sheva a fresh start in the US, where she learned English, got an education, and eventually she would join the BSAA. Overall, I like Sheva. I'm glad she wasn't set up as the predictable civilian or rookie out of her depth around bioweapons. If you ignore her AI during gameplay, Sheva is fairly capable in the story. She holds her own alongside Chris, is never treated as a liability, and stands by him when things go to shit once Chris admits his mission is a personal one. While this is still his story, RE5 is a great introduction for her. It's a bummer she never got to star in another mainline RE game or a spin-off. If Sheva had been in RE6, she wouldn't have let Chris turn into a drunken shell of his former self. But if a RE5 remake does happen, I hope they expand on her character some more. Also, can you imagine Sheva in the RE engine? Especially in her tribal outfit. Or the fairy tale outfit. Good lord. Since I just went through introducing Sheva as your partner, let's talk about how that actually works in the game. You can play through the whole campaign with a buddy, either split screen or online. If you're playing solo, your partner is AI controlled, and you can only play as Chris during your first playthrough, but beating the game lets you play as Sheva. Now, you remember those sections in RE4 where you had to protect Ashley? Wouldn't it be awesome if you could actually fight back, but the trade-off is you have to babysit her literally the entire game? No, it wouldn't be awesome. It sucks. And look, all these years later, your partner's AI still isn't great. She'll waste ammo, burn through healing items, run off to grab pickups, and generally does very little to keep herself alive unless you're explicitly telling her to follow you. It's a noble idea on paper, but in practice, you're still kind of managing a partner, just one with a gun instead of a flashlight. There is a silver lining though. Whatever the AI lacks in self-preservation, it makes up for in accuracy. Hand your partner a strong weapon, especially a sniper rifle, and they turn into an absolute menace. It's almost funny how much more reliable your partner becomes the second you put a really good gun in their hands. Also, for the most part, they avoid danger during scripted sections, and they instantly complete any lever or switch puzzle you send them to do. But here's my bigger issue with co-op in this game. Outside of the novelty of just having a friend along for the ride, RE5 doesn't actually do anything interesting with it. The entire system boils down to one player splitting off to grab a key or hit a switch while the other covers them or briefly fends for themselves. That's it. That's the whole co-op design. And it's such a missed opportunity, because the original games built so much of their identity around puzzles in between the horror. Imagine if RE5 had leaned into that instead. Sections where both players actually have to work together to solve something, disarm a trap, or guide each other through separate spaces using context only one of you can see. That's meaningful co-op. What we got is stand here and shoot while I open this door. That might be tricky for someone playing solo with an AI partner, but they could have just reused the partner zapping system from Resident Evil 0 for puzzle sections. If RE5 ever gets the remake treatment, this is the one thing I'd want them to fix more than anything. Make cooperation actually mean something instead of just being a feature on the back of the box. Alright, before I move on, we gotta talk about the giant elephant in the room. Resident Evil 5's graphics. Well, more specifically, the filter they slapped over the graphics. The 7th generation of gaming is infamous for the brown-gray, realistic filters it would slap on games, especially shooters, using movie logic to try and make those games more realistic and cinematic. Resident Evil 5 tries to follow that trend, even if you could argue that it's trying to give a grimy horror vibe. And I'll be honest, that look never gelled with me. Not just for RE5, but any game that did it during that generation. They all end up so desaturated and boring. All of those games blending together, looking worse as time went on. The only game that pulled off that look for me was Grand Theft Auto 4. And while I try to respect the game's artistic vision, Resident Evil 5 looks so much better without the filter, which is why I disabled it using a mod. Characters look better, boss encounters and level have a more distinct visual identity, and the different periods of the day just stand out more.
Casualties continue to mount over the long years I've struggled. More and more, I find myself wondering if it's all worth fighting for. Maybe one day, I'll find out.
Hey, huyo mgeni anafanya nini hapa?
You don't have to get touchy.
After bribing the checkpoint guard who gets a little too handsy searching Sheva, our duo steps into the Kijuju Autonomous Zone. Not surprisingly, the locals are less than friendly, giving us the stink eye as we walk past, just waiting for an excuse to start something. Wonder what that guy getting beaten in the sack did. But before things can pop off, all the villagers suddenly all vanish. Where'd everyone go? Mancala? Proceeding through the area, Chris and Sheva meet up with their contact, who fills them in that their target, a black market bioweapon dealer named Ricardo Irving, has been spotted in the area. He arms our duo and brings up Ouroboros, RE5's new virus that threatens to destroy the whole world, though he doesn't know much about it. Despite its importance to the plot, we won't be fighting many enemies infected with or created by Ouroboros. Nope, the majority of enemies are controlled or created by Las Plagas, specifically the new Type 2 Plaga. Unlike the original Las Plagas from RE4, which could take days to hatch and take over a victim, Type 2 matures much faster, are force-fed to victims and take over in seconds, like this poor bastard here.
Freeze!
Are you okay?
RE5's main enemies are the Majini, Swahili for evil spirit. Like the Ganado, they're technically living people being puppeted by parasites. But despite their increased aggression, Majini can pass for normal humans and maintain most of their higher brain function. So they can wield weapons, plan ambushes, call out to their pals if they spot ya, and even use guns. Which justifies the cover shooting sections you'll see later in the game. Like the Ganado, the Majini don't really do it for me the way zombies from the earlier games did. Narratively, they're underwhelming. There's tons of potential for a pod people situation where you don't know who's infected and who to trust. Imagine a scenario where some NPC you've been working with all game turns out to have been infected and manipulating you the whole time. That'd be a great twist. But gameplay wise, they're mostly just a roundabout way to let enemies use guns while pretending they're still zombies. They work for an action game, but they don't feel like a real threat compared to the zombies from the first 3 games where ammo was scarce and didn't drop off enemies. Their mutated variants fare a little better, but mostly because they're bullet sponges. Proceeding forward, our contact gets captured, and we're not really in a position to realistically save him, so Christian Sheva can do nothing but watch as he gets the Ned Stark treatment. The Majini spot us, and from here it's basically RE4's opening all over again. Hold out against a massive wave of enemies, except this version is meaner. It goes on longer, there's no church bell to end it early, and the Executioner Majini is arguably a bigger threat than Dr. Salvador was. You do have some environmental hazards to exploit, like burning barrels and an electrical transformer to make up for your lack of firepower. Since it's going to be a minute until backup arrives, now's a good time to talk about how the gameplay has evolved from RE4. On the surface, it's the same over-the-shoulder system, shots are more accurate but you still can't move and shoot at the same time, and your movements have that deliberate sluggishness that makes it tougher to react to threats. But there are actual cover mechanics now. You can snap behind a wall or crouch behind certain objects to protect yourself and return fire, though that's regulated to the latter half of the game. The Majini themselves are a step above the Ganado. They're faster, harder to stun, and react quicker. You also dodge your shots easier if you take too long to fire. Ammo drops are more generous to compensate, but the game encourages you to lean on melee, which is much more balanced here than it was in RE4. In RE4, melee was almost broken. You could shoot a Ganado in the face, follow up with a roundhouse kick that knocked them flat, then knife them while they're down. Since they'd stay stunned for a ridiculously long time, you could clear out groups of enemies with barely any ammo if you chained it right. RE5 reins that in. The knife is weaker, the stun window is shorter, and Majini won't stay down for long, so you can't just spam the knife for easy kills. But to compensate, the system got a serious expansion. There are now several different melee moves per character, and which one triggers depends on where you shoot the enemy and whether you're standing in front of them or behind them. Shoot someone in the leg and melee them, you get a completely different animation than if you aim for the head. A back attack looks completely different from a front one too. Capcom even gave each character their own distinct melee style. Chris leans into his size, throwing heavy punches. Sheva's moveset focuses on her legs, roundhouse kicks, a somersault kick, even a Hurricane Rana. And the characters you unlock in the Mercenaries mode have their own full movesets too. There's even unique co-op melee moves. If an enemy ends up sandwiched between you and your partner, you can chain a melee combo between the two of you, knocking them back and forth before finishing them off. It's a small touch, but it's one of the rare moments where the co-op design does something genuinely clever, instead of just stand here, shoot there. You also have a new melee weapon you can buy, the Stun Rod. It stuns enemies for a decent amount of time, setting up melee attacks a lot easier, or giving you a bigger window to light them up with your guns. It's a solid choice for your AI partner in the early game too, helping you conserve ammo. While you could probably get through normal mode without ever leaning on melee, it becomes crucial on veteran difficulty where ammo is scarce and enemies are tougher. Outside the combat changes, healing has also been streamlined. Herbs are simplified down to just red and green this time. No yellow herbs, which means you can't increase your max health the way you could in RE4. But herbs and first aid sprays can now heal both you and your partner simultaneously, if you're standing close enough together. The bigger change is how death works. Instead of dying outright when your health hits 0, you enter a dying state. Your health bar flashes red and keeps draining, and your partner has to either heal you or reach you before time runs out. If they don't have a healing item, they can still stabilize you at 10% health just by getting to you. Outside of failing certain QTEs, or certain instant death attacks, it prevents cheap deaths and makes babysitting the AI partner a little more forgiving. If I'm being honest, while RE5 refines and balances some of RE4's rougher edges, it doesn't really improve upon its foundation. It's still satisfying and fun, but it doesn't build on what came before to make something better. It sands off the rougher edges to reduce player frustration without replacing them with anything new. Not a regression, just simplified. Now that my backup has finally arrived, I can segue nicely onto my next point. The merchant from RE4 is gone. Instead, a shop appears at the start of every chapter, or whenever you restart after dying past a checkpoint. You can sell treasure, buy new gear, and upgrade your weapons, but you can't buy regular ammo at all, aside from rounds for the grenade launcher. And the only healing item available for purchase is the first aid spray. Everything else you find in the field. You can immediately rerun a completed chapter if you want a better ranking or to farm gold to upgrade your weapons faster. While this kinda nukes the game's difficulty, weapon upgrades are tied to your story progression, so you avoid being overpowered during the early sections of the game. Your inventory has also seen a change, ditching the fun attaché case, and it's now a boring 3x3 grid, 9 slots total, and each item only takes up 1 slot regardless of type, though you can stack more grenades now. I'm not so sure this change was made for balance reasons, as while you're technically carrying less compared to Leon, your AI partner is essentially a pack mule you'll be using to carry any extra stuff, so managing your inventory is still a breeze. Alright, let's get the ball moving on the story again. Moving through the streets, we'll spot a tourist named Allison, crying out for help before getting dragged off screen. We catch up to her too late, unfortunately, as she ends up getting infected with Las Plagas. And after putting some shots in Allison, her head bursts open into a cephalo, the big tentacles stage mutation of Las Plagas Type 2. It functions the same way as the Guadaña from RE4, occasionally popping up after you take down a Magini, whipping around to damage you. Though it's a bit tankier and takes more damage to destroy, you can still one-shot it with a flash grenade. Unlike the Guadaña and other Las Plagas variants which didn't pop up until several hours into RE4, you're barely 20 minutes into RE5 when the cephalo shows up, which really shows the game's heavier lean into action, as things never really stop escalating, as opposed to the slower approach RE4 went with, taking its time to let you get used to an enemy before throwing something new to worry about at ya. I can't say one approach is better than the other, I just felt it was worth mentioning. Reaching the rendezvous point with Alpha Team, we arrived too late. They stepped into a trap. Something took them all out and Irving got away. The lone survivor gives Chris a disc with info about Irving's bioweapons deal, and after he dies, the duo takes off after someone who's watching them. Arriving at an underground area with a huge furnace room, we get our first look at Ouroboros.
What the hell is that?
I think that's what got Alpha Team.
Ouroboros stands out compared to what we've fought so far, as it looks like a monstrous pile of moving flesh. Instead of a single creature, you're fighting what's basically a massive churning pile of leech-like worms wrapped around the corpse of the poor bastard that was injected with the Ouroboros virus. Despite shambling around slowly, it's still a decent threat, since you're fighting it in a small room. It has good reach with its standard attack, and it can chuck a ball of its leeches at ya. Throw in the fact it's a big damage sponge, and Ouroboros is a decently intimidating first boss. That said, it's basically the poster boy for the attack its weak point kinda enemy. Gee, I wonder where I'm supposed to attack it. Shoot at the glowing yellow spots on its body to damage and dismember it. Then, once it's stunned, either hit it with a flame grenade, shoot an explosive canister near it, or lead it into the big furnace in the room to burn it and do massive damage. Do it a few more times, and Ouroboros is toast.
got it.
What was that thing?
BOW that scumbag Irving left behind to set us up. Considering what it did to Alpha Team, I think we're lucky to still be breathing.
If only we could have gotten there sooner.
If we had, we'd probably be dead too. Chris to HQ, do you copy?
This is HQ. Excellent work out there. We'll analyze the data immediately.
This whole town's gone to hell. The people here, they're acting like those Ganado detailed in the Kennedy report. And aside from that, there's something new, something we've never encountered before.
Our transportation has been taken out too. Requesting a mission update.
The mission stands. Capturing Irving is your top priority. We believe he may have fled to the mines on the other side of the train station.
Wait, we're the only two left. You want us to go in there alone?
Delta team have been dispatched and are on their way. They'll assist you in locating and apprehending Irving.
But wait, we
I
can't!
repeat, your mission stands. We can't afford to let him get away. Proceed to the mines beyond the station. Over and out.
This is insane!
You ever get the feeling you're expendable?
Don't be so pouty, guys. At least you have backup on the way. I'm sure they won't be cannon fodder that barely contributes to the mission. Leaving the storage facility, we'll make our way through a shipping port. You have to move a little slower at first unless you want to blow yourself up by running into a trip mine. Las Plagas infected dogs will start popping up in this level too. They're more durable and move faster compared to their RE4 counterparts. Their mutation is a lot cooler too. Their heads will split in half before they pounce to attack you. They aren't tough, just a nuisance as they attack you in groups of 2 or 3, while Magini are also attacking you. After crossing a bridge, we push through some sewers and run into a new Las Plagas variant, the Kipepio, a new flying variant that'll burst out of the back of a defeated Magini when you're outdoors. They're barely a threat and feel like they're designed to waste your ammo, since it can be tough to hit them while they're flying. At least for me anyway, since I used a controller for this playthrough. Continuing through the port, our backup arrives just when we start to get overwhelmed. Then start blowing up Magini left and right. Friendly fire is on though, so you could get yourself killed if you don't take cover while rockets rain down. Unfortunately, in the tradition of all Resident Evil helicopter pilots, they don't last long, as they get swarmed by flying Las Plagas and crash with no survivors. Moving on, we'll have our first encounter with the Chainsaw Magini. Like their RE4 counterpart, Dr. Salvador, they're a durable mini-boss with a chainsaw. No shit. And while he feels tankier, seriously, this fucker soaked up a shitload of damage, even with the environmental hazards in the arena. The Chainsaw Magini isn't as deadly, since he can't instantly one-shot you, at least on normal mode. I took care of him without much of a hassle, but unfortunately, a bug happened when I looted him for the gate key I needed to move on. He just picked his ass up again, and gave chase, killing Sheva when he trapped her in a corner, forcing me to reload from a checkpoint. Didn't know if I wanted to bother bringing it up, but this was one of those few times I died outside of some insta-kill bullshit late in the game. Once we reach the helicopter crash site, we get swarmed by Maginis on motorcycles. So when I reached this cutscene, it felt so off, as it's paced weird, and I could have sworn this was a QTE moment, but it wasn't prompting me to press anything. As it turns out, I was right, but I didn't know that Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition has QTE Assist, which is turned on by default. So outside of certain button counters to dodge an attack from some enemies and bosses, all the extended QTE scenes just play out on their own, which I don't mind in the least. QTEs are less intrusive in RE5 compared to 4, but they were always annoying in practice. It never felt like a meaningful addition to gameplay. They also made it harder to focus on cutscenes since you're waiting to react to whatever button prompt shows up, or else earn a cheap death. Hoping RE6 on PC has QTE Assist too, because that game had way too many of them. Just when it looks like Chris and Sheva are overwhelmed, Delta Team shows up to bail them out. The team is led by Josh Stone, Sheva's mentor, who taught her all she knows and treats her like a little sister. He fills us in on Irving's location and hands over an SD card with some important info that hints at Chris's motivations for being in Africa.
Jill.
Are you alright?
This picture, it's... Forget it. It's nothing. Let's move out.
After splitting from Delta Team, we move through a rail yard and then an underground mine. Reaching the surface, we finally catch up to Ricardo Irving. And man, I always kind of forget he exists in this game. He's basically Resident Evil 5's equivalent of Ramon Salazar, just nowhere near as memorable or as important to the bigger story. Irving is less a character and more a plot device that points us in the direction of Wesker. Right as we corner him though, he gets bailed out by a mysterious woman in a plague mask. I wonder who that could be. After they escape, we'll cut through some more Magini and step into our next boss fight, against a giant Las Plagas infected bat called Popo Karimu. With an insect-like lower body, this thing's heavily armored everywhere except the fleshy underside of its tail. When it's in the air, it's pretty easy to hit its weak spot, but on the ground, not so much. Running around the circular arena, you can trap it in a pincer attack so you can hit it from behind while it's focused on your partner. Or you can scoop up the proximity mines scattered around the arena, arm and place them on the ground, then lead it over one and boom. You'll stun the giant bat for several seconds so you can unload on its exposed fleshy underside. For some reason, I remember this fight being much harder when I first played it, but back then I took turns playing with my brother and cousin, so I think we were too uncoordinated to approach the fight correctly. Once the bat abomination takes enough damage, it'll crash into and fall over a cliff with the truck that was transporting it, causing a massive explosion. Well, at least we don't have to worry about that thing anymore. After the Popo Karimu fight, a member of Delta Team scoops us up and drives us through the savannah and back to town to regroup with the rest of his unit. Some motorcycle Magini will be on our tail and we're thrown into a riveting on-rails turret section. Whee! This is so much fun! Alright, it's a small stumble, but at least it's just a one-off turret section. Well, shit, I guess I spoke too soon. This is Ndesu, basically RE5's answer to El Gigante from RE4. Despite that slow, ominous build-up to its reveal, the bodies of Delta Team scattered everywhere, the actual fight against this giant bastard is a huge letdown. It's just another extended turret section. You shoot at whatever body part it's moving in order to stop its attack, then aim at the multiple Las Plagas bursting out of its body. That's it. There's no strategy to the fight. In comparison, the original El Gigante was intimidating and the fight felt like a skill check. Testing to see if you've been on top of upgrading your weapons, conserving your ammo, staying mobile, and paying attention to your surroundings. El Gigante was a genuine challenge on the first playthrough, even with that stray dog acting as backup if you helped it. Taking into consideration co-op and the limitations of the partner AI, you still could have made the Ndesu fight a more engaging challenge. Just take some cues and expand on the Popo Karimu fight we just went through. One player distracts Ndesu while the other attacks him or lures him into traps around the arena to stun him and attack the exposed Las Plagas. There's an infinite amount of ideas you could have used that are more creative and engaging than a stationary turret section. Once it's down, this is the only time Ndesu shows up by the way, our heroes take in the aftermath of its rampage. Delta Team has been completely wiped out, and Josh is nowhere to be seen. Chris understands if Sheva wants to back out of the mission, but he's staying the course. He reveals to her that he's been searching for his partner Jill Valentine, our second protagonist from RE1, who's been missing for close to 3 years. As shown in flashbacks and the Lost in Nightmares DLC, Chris and Jill stormed a castle to apprehend Osmond Spencer, the founder of Umbrella. They were too late though, as Wesker got to the old man first and gutted him. During the fight that followed, Wesker easily overwhelms Chris and Jill thanks to the virus in his system that makes him superhuman. Just when it looked like he was about to win, Jill tackled Wesker out of a window down into a ravine, seemingly pulling the ultimate sacrifice to take out Wesker. Since Jill and Wesker's bodies were never found, Chris wasn't convinced either of them were dead. Chasing leads about their whereabouts, his search brought him to Kijuju, and that data file from Josh confirmed that Jill was alive. With Irving still on the loose, Chris and Sheva continue the mission, taking a hovercraft into the marshlands. Gameplay-wise, this chapter opens up considerably. There's a big gate blocking the way to the next major area. You need to track down 4 pieces of a mural scattered around the marshlands, spread across smaller settlements you can tackle in any order. It's a big open area packed with treasure, man-eating crocodiles that will absolutely one-shot you if you're not paying attention, and there's even a rocket launcher hidden out here if you go looking. This is easily the best chapter to replay to farm treasure to sell for weapon upgrades. Our main foes here are the Nidipaya, a tribe occupying the marshlands. Like everyone else we've run into, they've been infected with Las Plagas too. There's a note from a Nidipaya youth you can find that fills in the backstory on how they got infected. The tribe got displaced from their original land decades ago when Tricell moved in and built the oil field. Despite losing their ancestral home, they managed to adjust and thrive in the marshlands. That was until Ricardo Irving approached them, posing as the foreman of the oil field. Warning them about a disease in the area, he offered free vaccinations to the Nidipaya. In reality, he was using the entire tribe as test subjects for the new Las Plagas Type 3 variant. It killed every woman and child outright, a convenient way to avoid explaining why there's no child enemies in this game, and why the only female Magini you encounter was back in town. The Type 3 Las Plagas turned the surviving Nidipaya men hyper-aggressive, more so than the regular Magini. Their skin tone turned a pale blue, they lost the skin and lips around their mouths, and a few of them have an engorged heart that's popping out of their chest. Some of the men even experience a unique mutation where they doubled in size, essentially becoming elite enemies that soak up and deal a lot of damage. There's even a unique Las Plagas mutation too, the Divalia. Rare for most of the game, enemies infected with Las Plagas Type 3 can have the top half of their body explode outward after dying, replaced by a large, armored, segmented jaw that clamps shut over its vulnerable core. To actually deal some damage to this thing, you need to shoot its tail enough to stun it, and force the jaw open to damage its vulnerable core. But you don't want to stay close for long or it'll one-shot you by biting you in half. Hey, remember when I brought up problematic writing at the beginning of the video? Well, for some reason, as explained in that note from before, the infection also compels the Nidipaya to start wearing war paint and the traditional garb their ancestors wore during wartime. Which, yeah, sounds like a pretty clunky way of explaining why the Nidipaya are dressed like stereotypical African tribesmen. While most African countries are a lot more advanced than people realize, there are still isolated tribes that adhere to traditional ways of living and dressing. So there really isn't a need to use the Las Plagas infection as an excuse for the Nidipaya tribe's appearance. Honestly, I think it makes things worse, as the writers attempt to skirt around the racism controversy RE5 was receiving, ended up creating a weird plot hole. After finding the 4 mural pieces to open the gate to the main Nidipaya village, we move on to the execution grounds, a short segment fighting more of the tribe on the way to the oil fields. Once we get there, we finally reunite with Josh, and he's acting noticeably off. His explanation for how he ended up here is pretty vague, and Chris is looking at him with suspicion at first. I thought this was meant to be a setup for Josh betraying you later on, but nope. Despite being shaken by the death of his team, and realizing how out of his depth he is against the BOWs they fought, Josh stays loyal through the rest of the game. We fight with them against a swarm of Magini before splitting shortly after. Then we finally catch up to Irving, who makes his escape yet again, after rigging the harbor to blow up. This leads to a brief time section where you gotta haul ass across the harbor to reach Josh, and his escape boat, while cutting through another wave of enemies. After moving through the canals, we'll catch up to and board Irving's yacht. Cornered with nowhere left to run, he injects himself with a dominant strain Las Plagas. Cue a boss battle.
Won't you two just die already? You're making me look bad. Who do you think got this entire operation off the ground? Research like this doesn't fund itself, you know. Yet everyone looks down on me. But not anymore.
Don't do it!
I'm far beyond anything you could ever hope to become.
Now a tongue attached to a giant mutated whale thing, the boss fight against Irving plays like a Michael Bay version of the Del Lago fight from RE4. While you're primarily using the turrets on the ship to attack him, this isn't another turret section. Irving will attack you from both sides of the boat, so you're running back and forth between turrets, waiting for him to surface so you can hit the glowing polyps on his back, then destroying tentacles that breach the water in between. You also need to dodge his attacks while on a turret too. Land enough damage and he eventually surfaces fully exposed, giving you a clean window to really light him up. It's more actively engaging than the Del Lago fight, and honestly a better fight overall since it's so fast paced. Once we finally bring him down, in his dying moments, Irving accidentally lets something slip. Excella Gione, the head of Tricell Africa, was the one bankrolling his schemes, and is the one responsible for the outbreak in Kajuju. With his last breath, he points us toward a cave up ahead, telling us that that's where we'll find the answers we're looking for. Josh will split off again. He'll radio HQ to see if he can get Chris and Sheva more backup. We'll move through a short cave section, fighting off smaller spider-like Las Plagas, before things take a turn into full-on Legends of the Hidden Temple shenanigans. We gotta dodge burning iron balls, collapsing pillars, and solve Olmec's puzzles. Oh yeah, and that mutated bat boss makes a return here too, but he's considerably easier, mostly because of my upgraded arsenal. A proximity mine and a couple of shots from the Magnum are enough to drop him in under 30 seconds. At the end of the chapter, we'll get a cutscene that introduces Excella Gione and reintroduces Albert Wesker.
You know, I was surprised Las Plagas was such a success. When you first arrived, I had my doubts. And now Ouroboros is complete.
Your position at Tricell is secured.
Oh, I have my eyes set on something much bigger. You'll be needing a partner, right? Someone suitable to join you in your new world. I believe I've proven I'm worthy, haven't I?
Perhaps you have.
So, a quick backstory for Wesker for those not in the know, or need a refresher. But like Chris and Jill, Discount Neo here debuted back in the first Resident Evil, and was also a member of STARS, specifically the captain of their Alpha team. He led the team into the Arklay Mountains to investigate the strange murders in the area, and to offer support to STARS Bravo team, leading to the Spencer Mansion incident. Dilly-dally, shilly-shally, Wesker reveals he's a traitor working for Umbrella. He set up STARS as cannon fodder for the BOWs in the mansion in order to gather combat data. He reveals Umbrella's masterpiece, the Tyrant, gets his feelings hurt when Chris laughs at him.
Chris? Stop it!
Wesker, you're pitiful.
And then Wesker gets killed by said Tyrant. But Wesker returned in Code Veronica. He survived the events of RE1 and was superhuman thanks to the virus in his system that activated when he almost died. He got into a fight with Chris and his sister Claire before piecing out to fight another day. Finally, while not part of the Los Illuminados plot, Wesker is making moves behind the shadows in RE4. He sent Jack Krauser to infiltrate the cult and get his hands on a strain of the dominant species Plaga. Wesker also sent in Ada Wong to do the same, but she betrayed him, and sent a subservient strain of Las Plagas instead. Luckily for Wesker, he got his hands on the dominant strain anyways from the corpse of Krauser, who had infected himself with it before fighting Leon. Then he starts making deals with Tricell, which brings us to the present. There's a bunch of stuff I skipped over, like Wesker has a son apparently, but I wanted to keep it condensed into what was relevant to Resident Evil 5. Over several games, Wesker has been built up as the series' ultimate big bad, getting his hands on the different viruses and their variants introduced in each new game to aid him in his master plan, the creation of the ultimate virus, Ouroboros. Calm and collective, Wesker is the chess master always 2 moves ahead of our heroes, who manages to turn any setbacks in his plans into a win. Combine that with his superhuman abilities and you've got yourself an almost unstoppable big bad. Unfortunately, his motives and plans for Ouroboros leave a lot to be desired, but I'll get back to that later. Returning to Chris and Sheva, after more temple puzzles and avoiding giant lasers created by mirrors reflecting sunlight, don't ask, they stumble onto a cave filled with a strange flower. But it's no ordinary flower. It harbors the progenitor virus, the root virus behind the T-virus, and every variant that followed. This is where Umbrella's legacy began decades ago. The next section opens quietly. Inside the secret Tricell lab with no enemies in sight, There's lots of documents laying around detailing how Umbrella's founders first discovered the progenitor virus, and its potential to fundamentally alter human DNA. Umbrella didn't initially set out to create zombies, or horrible mutated abominations, but to create the next step in humanity's evolution. But outside of a certain project, their efforts bore little fruit. Moving past some caged animals, we run into an old friend from Resident Evil 2, the Licker. Quite a few of them, actually. In RE2, these blind, inside-out monstrosities were a rare enemy that mutated from T-virus infected zombies. Despite being smaller and arguably not as powerful as their RE2 cousins, Tricell found a way to mass-produce the Licker by engineering them so they can sexually reproduce. Ugh, gross. That's not an image I wanted to picture in my head. This area is infested with these fuckers, and they're durable enough to soak up hits from your stronger guns too. So unless you got the ammo to spare, or have a decent stock of grenades, you're better off just running from them when you can. Eventually, we reach the giant room with a rotating platform, the walls filled with rows of pods, all containing people Tricell kidnapped for experimentation. Recognizing this place from the photo of Jill on the SD card, Chris searches for her pod on the computer, but activates a trap. Cue a boss battle.
It stopped.
Why?
Well, that's why.
This giant spider crab thing is U8, which isn't as tough as it looks. It slowly circles around the platform, takes random swipes at you, and barfs up flying bugs that drop ammo when you kill them. The strategy to beat U8 is to shoot the exposed flesh on its legs, causing it to fall and stun it, then fire into its mouth, or better yet, shove a grenade in there for maximum damage, and to crack its shell faster to expose its brain. It's a straightforward fight, and the only real threat in its arsenal is a one-shot pincer grab attack that for the life of me I couldn't figure out how to avoid. Like, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to press a button prompt to dodge his pincer like you do for his regular swiping move, but it never triggered for me. Not sure if that's because of the QTE assist being on or not, but after a few deaths, I said fuck it and ended the fight with the rocket launcher. After U8 is dealt with, Chris finally gets access to Jill's pod, but it's empty. Don't worry, Chris, you'll find her. Hell, she might be even closer than you realize. Excella then calls by Microsoft Teams to gloat and taunt our heroes, warning them to give up while they're ahead. Moving through a factory area, in between picking off militant Maginis and Lickers, we'll encounter a new enemy. The first successful Ouroboros BOW that didn't instantly get turned into Worm Chow, the Reaper. Created by accident when cockroaches were exposed to the virus, it really lives up to its name. Its carapace is fully armored and can shrug off shots from most of your arsenal. To do some real damage, you need to shoot the white bulbs that appear on its body, which isn't as easy to hit as you think, as the Reaper releases a vision-distorting gas that fucks with your aiming. And if you stay too close to it, the Reaper can one-shot you by butting you in half. While the Reaper is manageable when it's by itself, the real danger is when it spawns while you're fighting the Magini, so if you're not careful, this little fucker can sneak up on you and take you out. Moving on, we finally catch up to Excella, and she lays out more of Wesker's plan. Ouroboros isn't a new BOW to sell to terrorists, it's something bigger. Part of Wesker's vision for human evolution. To demonstrate, she releases a guy who's been infected with it. For a second, it actually looks like he's adapting. He manages to suppress the worms bursting out of him, and his eyes shift to the same gold cat eyes that Wesker has. But Ouroboros takes him over almost immediately, and he gets consumed by the worms anyways, growing into a bigger version of the first Ouroboros creature we fought. The fight against it isn't much different from our first encounter. Use flame rounds or incendiary grenades to stun and weaken it with fire. There's also explosive canisters and a flamethrower on the wall you can use too. Once it's stunned, its yellow weak points will be exposed, and you need to unload on them before Ouroboros recovers. Rinse and repeat until he dissolves into sludge. Next chapter, while chasing after Excella, we'll stumble on some files documenting the creation of Ouroboros. When development started on the virus, it was 100% lethal to anything injected with it. And to overcome this first hurdle, Wesker used Jill. Back in RE3, she was infected with the T-virus, and was saved by Carlos injecting her with a vaccine. So using the T-virus antibodies in her blood, Wesker was able to make Ouroboros less deadly. It's still like 98% lethal though, because literally every person we see infected by it in this game still ends up as worm food. Outside of the Reaper, I think the only partial Ouroboros successes were some enemies in Revelations 2, and a villain from one of the CG movies, which is a little disappointing. The majority of enemies we fight throughout are Las Plagas based. Ouroboros never really gets its moment as the centerpiece threat it should be, not helped by the fact boss fights against it play out the same, just progressively bigger. Though thematically I guess it tracks, since Ouroboros was never meant to create controllable bioweapons. It was meant to destroy most of humanity so only the chosen survived. I'll elaborate on that in just a few, as it's time for a reunion with some old friends.
Wesker, you are alive.
This is Wesker.
We last met at the Spencer estate, wasn't it? Well, isn't this one big family reunion? I would expect you to be happier to see us.
Us?
So slow to catch on.
Whoa, no way! The woman in the mask was Jill the whole time. Not a mind-blowing reveal. Anyone could have connected the dots after Jill was first mentioned. I'd say the real shocker is her new look. As explained by checking the PC in the room where you fought U8, Jill's blonde hair and paler skin were side effects of being in her stasis pod for so long. Also, and I only just clocked this, with the blonde hair, the purple bodysuit, and the new over-the-top acrobatic fighting style, Jill is basically Nina Williams from Tekken. Not sure if her new look was an intentional homage or a happy coincidence.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
The boss fight against Jill and Wesker is genuinely tough. Jill isn't much of a threat during this phase as Sheva will keep her occupied and separated from Wesker. Mr. Worldwide, on the other hand, is a beast. He just straight up matrix dodges almost everything you throw at him. He can do heavy damage with his handgun, and he'll blitz you to unload some kung fu on your ass. The only way to hurt Wesker is with attacks he doesn't see coming, which means shooting him from behind or as he rounds a corner, which isn't too hard to pull off thanks to the design of the surrounding area, but the window to hurt him is small, and he soaks up a ton of damage. Technically, you don't need to win against Wesker, just survive for 7 minutes and he'll fuck off, leaving Jill to deal with you. He'll then give away how he's been controlling Jill, not with Las Plagas, but with a control device on her chest. It pumps Jill with a chemical that forces her to obey Wesker, while also giving her superhuman abilities similar to his. So the objective shifts, take her down without killing her, which sounds like it'd be a challenge given how fast Jill is, how she flips around constantly, and she'll unload on you with twin Uzis too. Also, for some reason, Jill hisses at you like a cat. But in practice, it's pretty easy to beat Jill without even firing a shot. Just get close to her so Chris can reach out to her with the power of friendship, then either get behind her to restrain her so Sheva damages the control device, or knock Jill down and mash the button prompt to try tearing the control device off. The fight would be over instantly if Chris wasn't grabbing the thing in the weirdest way possible. Come on, Redfield. With your size, you could grip that control device with one hand and yank it off no problem.
Chris. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
You're Sheva, right? Yes. I couldn't control my actions. Oh, but God, I was still aware. Oh, forgive me. It's all right. Thank you. Listen, I'm gonna be all right. You do need to stop him.
We can't just leave you here.
You have to. This is your only chance. If Wesker succeeds, Ouroboros will be spread across the globe. Millions will die.
Oh, yeah, but...
I'm all right. You need to stop him. Chris, you're the only one who can. Before it's too late. Don't you trust your partner?
It's a bummer Jill can't join us for the final fight for some reason. She says go on without me like she's fatally wounded or the arena is collapsing around them, but she seems mostly fine to me. Like, I guess the fight and having returned to her senses took a lot out of her, but Jill looks like she needs a 5-minute breather and a green herb, not to be benched for the rest of the game. Most likely, Capcom couldn't figure out how to have Jill contribute meaningfully to the final stretch without completely overshadowing Sheva, which, okay, fair enough. But sidelining her feels like a bummer given that the whole emotional engine of Chris's mission was finding Jill. She really should have had a bigger part to play in the final confrontation with Wesker. I'll circle back to that in the closing thoughts, but for now, we got a boat to catch. Fighting our way through Wesker's freighter, we'll catch up to Excella. She bolts but drops a case of vials filled with PG67A/W, the serum that stabilizes the progenitor virus in Wesker's system, and keeps his superhuman abilities in check. Well, isn't that convenient? We push through more of the ship before hitting a flashback cutscene that fills us in on what actually happened when Wesker killed Spencer. Spencer, in his final moments, reveals that Wesker wasn't just a random Umbrella employee who lucked into his abilities, he was manufactured. Spencer dreamed of becoming a god, leading a race of superhumans to create a new world. To fulfill that dream, he ran a decades-long eugenics program called Project W. There's a lot to Project W, but the TLDR is Spencer handpicked hundreds of kids to be adopted, gave them the surname Wesker, the name of the director of the project. He gave them the best education available, and let those kids go off to do whatever they like when they became adults. From that group, he narrowed down the best of the best, down to just 13 individuals, injecting them with the modified progenitor virus, with Albert Wesker the only success and survivor of the project. Wesker handles the fact his entire life was a lie surprisingly well. If anything, he kills Spencer because that decrepit old man had the audacity to think he could be a god. And now Wesker intends to take that role for himself. Oh yeah, I should mention that in the Lost in Nightmares DLC, you can find a document that reveals there's at least one other Project W survivor, Alex Wesker. She's not relevant to this game's story, but if you're curious where that thread goes, she's the main villain of Resident Evil Revelations 2. Oh, and Zeno from RE9 might be another survivor, assuming he's not a clone of Wesker. I'm going to avoid spoilers for Requiem, but certain reveals and unanswered questions in the story have me feeling like RE5 is getting a remake that'll establish a new canon. That or Requiem's DLC will fill in the blanks. Moving on, we'll run into Excella wandering around and writhing in pain. She's outlived her usefulness, and Wesker's infected her with Ouroboros. Not surprisingly, she doesn't adapt to the virus, and worms burst out of her, absorbing every corpse in the vicinity, and forming into a kaiju-sized mass of tentacles and flesh. Ouroboros Sahari. Cue a boss fight. Like every Ouroboros fight before it, you're targeting the yellow cores, but fire isn't going to cut it at this scale. Instead, the game provides a laser targeting gun that locks onto the cores and calls in a fucking satellite laser strike to destroy them. The gun needs to recharge between uses, so there's some rhythm to it. Lock on, fire, wait, repeat. Once you take out the 4 visible cores, a larger one exposes itself. If you still got decent ammo in your regular weapons, save the satellite laser specifically for that bigger core since it hits significantly harder. After you damage the main core enough, it retreats, forcing you to destroy the smaller ones again before it re-exposes itself. While it's a lengthy fight, it's not all that tough. Ouroboros Sahari mostly attacks with dodgeable swipes and firing blobs of worms. Still, it's a fun little spectacle of a fight. After the boss fight, we spot Wesker loading up a stealth bomber, and Jill calls in with some crucial info. Wesker's powers are unstable. He needs regular injections of P67A/W to keep it under control. More importantly, the dosage has to be precise. Too much and it acts like a poison, destabilizing his abilities entirely. Lucky thing we held onto that vial Excella dropped earlier. Oh, and we're finally given the full scope of Wesker's plan. He's going to use the stealth bomber to fly up to the planet's tropopause and release missiles filled with Ouroboros, high enough that the troposphere's wind currents will carry the virus across the entire globe. Wesker intends to wipe out the vast majority of humanity, leaving only the chosen superhumans who can successfully bond with Ouroboros to inherit the world, with himself as their god. He essentially hijacked and inverted Spencer's plan, which is kinda disappointing if I'm being honest. Part of it is because the whole godlike villain wants to destroy humanity plot has been done to death, but also because Wesker always felt smarter than that, you know? Like, what's the next step after destroying the world? Build a perfect utopia with his new race of superhumans? Wesker feels too arrogant and too full of himself to just hijack some other guy's plan, let alone give others the same powers he has. I don't think he's above trying to take over the world, he'd just do it in a more conventional way, using bits and pieces from all the other viruses to create a version of Ouroboros that would create the ultimate BOW. Through a combo of manipulating Tricell and selling BOWs to the highest bidders, he'd resurrect Umbrella or make his own version of it, using an army of monsters to topple nations and conquer the world. Carlo Rodimus' whole scheme in RE6 is more what I would expect Wesker to do. Welp, let's go stop that asshole before he turns planet Earth into Wormworld.
Your plans are finished, Wesker.
There's no way out this time.
Don't you two ever tire of failing in your mission? You've really become quite an inconvenience for me.
What do you accomplish by unleashing Ouroboros?
Every day, humans come one step closer to self-destruction. I'm not destroying the world, I'm saving it.
As the final boss, Wesker does not disappoint. Like our first encounter with him, he'll just matrix dodge pretty much everything you throw at him, unless you get behind him or catch him rounding a corner. The difference is that the arena here is wide open, which makes those angles significantly harder to set up. The trick is turning off the massive spotlights in the hangar, using the darkness to hide from Wesker, and make ambushing him easier. It rewards you for thinking about the space rather than just running around shooting. He's still using the same moveset from your last fight, but occasionally he'll hop near the stealth bomber and start throwing fucking missiles at you. Well, two can play at that game. Hey Wesker, eat this! Well shit. I'm sure most of you had the same feeling I did when first seeing Wesker just casually catching your rocket and throwing it back at you. Just pure disbelief that the RPG, the strongest weapon in the series, that could one-shot any enemy or boss, does nothing against Wesker. No cheesing this fight. That said, the rocket launcher isn't useless, and it's part of the intended strategy in beating him. The game provides you with an RPG and several rockets in this stage, if you don't bring your own. When Wesker catches your rocket or is getting ready to toss his own, you have a small window to shoot the rocket and blow it up, doing serious damage. Do it enough times and you'll stagger him. Then you just gotta rush in before he catches his breath and end the fight by giving Wesker an overdose of his special serum. Unfortunately, the overdose doesn't mutate him or shut off his powers, just overloading his senses. He's weakened but still has enough gas in the tank to board the bomber and start taking off. Luckily, Chris and Sheva have been working on their cardio and get onto the bomber as it flies off.
It seems I may have underestimated you, Chris.
Save it, Wesker. There's no one left to help you now.
I don't need anyone else. I have Ouroboros. In less than 5 minutes, we'll reach the optimal altitude for missile deployment. Ouroboros will be released into the atmosphere, ensuring complete global saturation.
Man, did that shot do anything to Wesker? Seems to me he's still got plenty of juice left. During the long QTE struggle, Chris hits him with another dose during their fight, and during that whole mess, the cargo bay door gets opened. Wesker grabs Sheva to avoid being sucked out, and in a direct callback to the Spencer Estate incident with Jill, there's a slow motion beat where Sheva looks like she's about to let go and take Wesker with her. Not willing to sacrifice another partner, Chris grabs her and Sheva shoots Wesker in the head. He lets go and the bomber crashes straight into a volcano. Miraculously, everyone survives, except Wesker's shirt and duster. His powers finally neutralized, he makes do by juicing himself up on Ouroboros. Like we've seen before, the worms start bursting out of him, but unlike everyone else, Wesker doesn't become worm chow. He actually manages to maintain a degree of control over them, and starts assimilating pieces of wreckage into himself as he transforms. Cue the final boss fight. Oh, and a fun little side note, Wesker didn't adapt to Ouroboros. According to the devs, he would have eventually been consumed too, which really shows how stupid his plan ended up being, because if it succeeded, he would have been destroyed by his own doomsday weapon. During the first phase of the fight, all you can do is run, as Wesker is an advancing wall of doom, and his tentacle arm can end the fight instantly by launching you into the lava. You want to stay ahead of him until Chris and Sheva end up separated. Wesker goes after Sheva, she ends up dangling from a ledge, and we gotta hold Wesker off with suppressing fire until she can recover. But oh no, there's a giant boulder blocking her path. What can Chris possibly do? Yeah, that's right, he's gonna have to punch it out of the way. I know this scene is like the defining meme for RE5, but am I the only person who never made a big deal about it? It's not some dramatic, drawn-out moment where he's screaming to save Sheva. It's a brief QTE that lasts maybe 2 seconds. Is it unrealistic? Sure. But is Chris punching and shoving a huge boulder really more absurd than firing a giant satellite laser? Or Leon outrunning a giant robot statue of Salazar? It just feels like such a small moment compared to the other nonsense that pops up in this series. But that's just me. Once Chris and Sheva reunite, it finally turns into a proper boss fight. Hit Wesker enough to expose a glowing yellow weak spot, unload everything you've got into him before it closes, rinse and repeat. His swipes won't instantly kill you unless you're already low on health. And the main challenge is positioning yourself around him when the weak spot ends up on his back. Once you do enough damage, you can sit back and enjoy the game's ending.
Locked and loaded.
Suck on this, Wesker.
Your time's up, you son of a bitch. That was for our fallen brothers.
Before we get into my final thoughts, 2 more things worth covering: the DLC and Mercenaries mode. Resident Evil 5 got 2 story DLC episodes. The first is Lost in Nightmares, a shorter, puzzle-heavy survival horror throwback set in the Spencer estate. The very mission we saw in flashbacks throughout the main game, where Chris and Jill confront Wesker. It's a deliberate tonal departure from the main game, leaning back into the series' roots with atmosphere and puzzles over action. The second is Desperate Escape, which picks up right after we left Jill. She teams up with Josh as they fight through waves of a genie to reach a helicopter and escape, explaining where they got the helicopter when they show up to save Chris and Sheva in the ending. Both are on the shorter side, but they're solid additions, and they feel a little bit like an apology to everyone who wanted Jill more involved in the main story, outside of being Wesker's puppet. Next, we got the Mercenaries. If you played RE4, you know the deal. Kill hordes of enemies, increase your combo score by chaining kills, and earn as many points as possible within a time limit. RE5's version keeps that core loop but adds some meaningful changes. Time pickups are now time crystals instead of clocks that you activate performing a melee attack on them. And killing an enemy with a melee attack rewards you with 5 extra seconds on the clock, which naturally pushes you towards being more aggressive and stylish rather than just playing it safe. Each character can be played in their different outfits, and each outfit comes with its own distinct set of weapons and items, though the melee moves for that character stay the same. Local and online co-op is supported, and playing with a partner ups the difficulty to compensate. There's also a Mercenaries Reunion variant added later as DLC. Same stages and gameplay, but with a different roster, swapping in Josh, Excella, Barry Burton, and Rebecca Chambers while removing Jill and Wesker, and tweaking enemy spawns and patterns. Characters in Reunion also have alternate, more powerful melee attacks depending on who their partner is. I'll be honest, I've never been a god tier Mercenaries player, but it's easily my favorite of the extra modes these games include. The fast-paced action combined with a timer is a genuine shake-up in the main campaign's pacing, and the characters feel distinct from each other. Different loadouts, different melee moves, it actually changes how you approach building combos rather than everyone playing the same. That also means some characters are harder to use than others, which keeps it from getting too repetitive. Outside of that, there's still a few unlockables. The points you earn from completing chapters can be spent on character figurines, new weapons, unlimited ammo for fully upgraded weapons, and some extra costumes. Overall, a solid package. And that was Resident Evil 5. So what did I think? Well, I still love it. After all these years, it still holds up, and the extras they've added over time have made it an even better package. The story is simple but action-packed. The gameplay is satisfying and adds a real depth with its melee system. And despite the controversial all-in on co-op, and the partner AI being genuinely unhelpful at times, if not completely brain-dead, the game is an absolute blast to play with a friend. That said, if I'm leveling real criticism at RE5, I think it oversimplifies things that RE4 actually made interesting. Item management, the shop, treasure collecting, all of it gets streamlined in ways that cost the game some tension. You'll never have a moment where you're genuinely deciding whether to keep an extra gun or free up space for ammo and healing items, because your partner is basically a walking item box. The merchant in RE4 would show up at unpredictable points throughout a chapter. No guarantee you could upgrade your gear or grab a first aid spray before a big encounter. RE5 just sends you to the shop between every chapter, and ships you back there whenever you die before the last checkpoint. Less player hostile, sure, but it kills the difficulty and makes the whole resource economy feel toothless. And then there's the bigger issue. I don't think RE5 does enough to differentiate itself from RE4. Similar enemies, similar level design, similar plot beats, similar bosses. It often feels less like a sequel that builds on RE4, and more like RE4 in Africa. I wouldn't say it does most of those things worse, but it doesn't do enough of them differently to truly stand on its own. Oh, and that ranking question that I opened the video with? Where does RE5 actually sit for me personally in the series? Honestly, I've sunk considerably more time into RE4 and RE2 Remake than I have into RE5, or the rest of the series for that matter. So take that with this in mind. But having replayed it for this video, I think it comfortably sits in the top half of the series for me. It's not RE4, it's not RE2 Remake, it's not RE7, but it's a better game than people give it credit for. In conclusion, RE5 is a game that stands the test of time, 17 years on. While it pushed Resident Evil even harder into action territory and blockbuster spectacle, it excels at being exactly what it is. If Resident Evil 4 was an 80s action movie, Resident Evil 5 is the darker, grittier action blockbuster of the 2000s. Love it or hate it, there's a reason it became the highest selling game in the franchise. With the RE remakes rolling along, and even Code Veronica getting the remake treatment now, an RE5 remake feels like a matter of when, not if. And look, your more diehard RE fans would argue this game, and especially RE6, are the ones that need remakes the most. But I'm genuinely not sure what a remake of RE5 would look like. Better partner AI, co-op made optional, a reworked story with more depth to Wesker's motivations. Those are the obvious fixes. But the game has an identity that's locked to its era. Its flaws are part of what it is. You could try injecting survival horror DNA back into it the way the RE4 remake did, but RE5 is so action heavy at its core that I'm not sure the same approach would land as cleanly. Resident Evil Requiem tried to find that middle ground between survival horror and action gameplay, and while it's a great game, it didn't quite stick the landing either. Still, Capcom never ceases to surprise me. Maybe they could pull it off, but regardless of whether a Resident Evil 5 remake ever happens, The original is a gem that's absolutely worth your time and money if you've never played it before. And that's the video. Thanks for watching. I'm going to skip my usual outro since the video took longer to get out than I wanted. Next vid is going to be on something smaller and out faster than my usual pace, covering a sequel to a game I covered on the channel a couple years ago. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and comment down below. What's your favorite Resident Evil game? Do you think it's inevitable RE5 will get a remake too? Do you want me to cover RE6? Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm hoping to get that silver plaque before I enter my 40s, so if you're new to the channel, I would love your support and if you subscribed. Check out whatever the recommended video is here at the end. I'm FuzzySlippers, and I'll see you later. Peace.